Tonight on an interview with an interesting person, Mike McCurdy, and your host, Kevin Schoen.
Good evening, good afternoon, or whatever time you're watching this. I'm Kevin Schoen, and this is Interview with an Interesting Person. Tonight we have Mike McCurdy. So, one thing I'd like to talk about is goats.
Yeah, I love goats.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm from kind of the more country areas of Michigan. I was born in Grand Rapids, but lived in Howell, Michigan, and all around me were farmers and stuff like that. We had our own little barn, and we grew chickens and those types of things. And that was never really a big issue, but Meridian Township, you live, I don't know if we want to mention where you live, but you live in Meridian Township, and Meridian Township, part of it's highly rural, but part of it's highly suburban-ish, right? And so you had acquired, to tell me the story of goats and how that the whole goat thing panned out in Meridian Township.
Well, I own 6 acres on Okemos Road.
Yep.
It's an area that's, people around me have some acres attached to their property, but more or less we're in a suburban area where
Right.
there's if you've got houses around us that have their little tiny plots with their big McMansions on them.
Yeah, across the way there's subdivisions.
There's subdivisions, and
Yep.
a friend of mine had 5 goats, five Nigerian dwarf goats. So not big goats, small goats, and his kid had got them for a project, and he was staying with her mom, wasn't able to take care of them. He's like, hey, can you take these goats off my hands? And I said, well, sure, I'll take them. He said that, he was giving me all his hay, all this. I was like, I'd always wanted goats, and it seemed like they were free.
Yeah.
So I took them, and about 6 months later, I got notice from Meridian Township that said you have 30 days to get rid of your goats.
Yeah.
And I'm
So they just sent you a letter randomly?
Well,
you didn't really know about it? So you just one day received a letter?
I received a letter in the mail, said you got 30 days to get rid of your goats. And, I'm an activist, right?
Yes, I want to see the full activist in action.
So my response, fair or not, it was maybe a little unfair, but I went out with my kids, and my daughter was about 6 at the time, and my son was about 1.5, barely walking, and I had my daughter's friend, and we went out, and I said, Gaia, introduce the world to your goats.
Yeah.
And
now did you do this
on camera? On camera.
Okay.
And she introduced all the goats by name with her friend, and meanwhile Jordan's in the background hugging goats and stuff, and then she says, and Meridian Township wants to take away our goats. Please call Meridian Township and tell them to leave our goats alone.
Yeah.
And so that was my response to the letter. Was I posted that up on Facebook, and this was early in the days of Facebook advertising.
Right.
And but I knew about it because my brother-in-law is involved in that as a profession in marketing. Yep. So he had kind of given me the insight on that, and so I threw $50 behind it and put it up on the internet, and the township began to get inundated with letters and phone calls saying, free the McCurdy goats, free the goats, free the goats, free the goats. Yeah. Next thing I know, the state journal's calling me, and my goats are in the newspaper, and the township rezoned us.
Rezoned you.
Yeah, and now we're...
So they rezoned your 6 acres of land to what, farm?
Rural residential,
rural
they call
residential.
it. So now I'm allowed to have as many goats as I want, and up to 5 large animals like horses, cows, and pigs and things.
Okay.
So I, honestly, the Meridian Township government, I think, handled it very well.
Yep.
So
they didn't want to change the rules. Originally you were zoned what? RBB or low density residential or something?
Yeah, I was zoned the same way all the neighborhoods around me were zoned.
Okay.
Even though I had 6 acres, and there was, because to me, it was really just a practical issue. My 5 little mini goats weren't hurting anybody.
Huh.
Right. In fact, everybody loved them. And that's what the township found out. Everybody started writing letters saying and I didn't know. I started reading the letters people were writing. I said, oh my God. Everyone's like, oh, I jog by those goats every day. I love them. Oh, I bring my kids walking by all the time. The board of trustees, give them all credit. They got all those letters and they said, yeah, okay, we get it. The community wants you to have those goats. So we're going to figure out how to make that happen. So,
Yep.
It's I think it was a sign of local government actually working. You know, representatives listening to their constituents and giving them what they want.
Well, you've been seeing changes occur, some minor changes about, you know, people allowed to have a couple of chickens now, you know.
Sure.
And, you know, I think that happened in East Lansing, or, you know, there was some regulation. Still, I'm not real familiar with the regulations, but, you know, essentially regulated which farm animals you could have, or which, you know, I mean, some people like chickens as pets, I guess.
Sure,
You
sure.
know, and if they're not making too much noise or causing any problems, what's wrong with having a couple of chickens, right? And so, I kind of think of that as specious, right? Like,
Right,
know,
you can have pit bulls,
Right.
but you can't have chickens.
Right.
You know, and that was one of the things I said to the township. I said, look, you guys, I could have 30 pit bulls, like in that same enclosure where I have 5 little cute goats right now, and it would be fine, right?
Yeah.
You know, but somehow these goats are a problem.
Right.
You know, that's.
Did you ever find out how or who complained, or if anybody actually did complain, or just some city official found out, hey, there's goats there, I better send a letter?
Yeah, I'm not certain.
You're not certain?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Just wondering how that all came about. You know, I think if nobody really complains, why does the government have to necessarily get involved in that?
Well, you know, John Beanster, rest in peace. Like he was,
Yep.
do you know, John was, he represented us on the township board of trustees in Meridian Township for decades, and
Yep.
he told me a little bit before he passed. He said, "Look, Meridian Township just hired a code enforcement officer, and they hired him to go around and look for things to write tickets about." He said, John was great. He said, I tried to stop this. I fought this.
Yep.
I lost.
Yep.
You know, John was the kind of guy, he fought so we could have 8-inch long grass because the township was trying to pass an ordinance to like make it so they give tickets to people with grass over 6 inches, and he fought for 2 more inches because he said, you know, he didn't want an ordinance at all. But,
Right.
you know, he was a man of the people, you know, and I think that's probably why, right? If you have somebody whose job it is to drive around and look for things to write tickets to people for,
Right.
that's going to happen.
Yep.
You know, and I don't see why we need that. I back John on that. You know,
Yeah.
you know, I wish he'd won that battle.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, good. I'm glad we got the goat story.
It was the goat saga. We were actually, my family, it was beautiful. We were on the front page of the State Journal.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
my wife and kids and the goats. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
You know.
I saw that go along, and I saw a couple of the videos over the you know, little stories they had on stuff. So I'm glad you're now fully legal.
A
with your
legal
goats.
goat owner, that's
A
right.
legal goat owner.
Yes.
Not in violation of any governmental rules whatsoever.
That's right.
Great.
And,
Well,
and
hey,
my kids learned something too.
they did. They learned to see how you can, you know, adjust government to improve things.
Yeah.
Heard you've been to Israel.
I've done some work in Israel, Palestine.
Yep.
Mainly living in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Back during the Second Intifada.
What year was this approximately?
2001, 2, and 3. I was there.
2000. And so were you there?
Not the
for-
whole time. I went 3 different times. But
You went 3 different times over those 3 years.
Yes.
Were you there for like a week or a month or a couple days or what?
In all, I think I spent about 2-3 months there.
Okay.
I traveled widely around the West Bank.
Yeah.
When I was in the Gaza Strip, we stayed primarily in Rafah. It was pretty hard to move around at all in the Gaza Strip.
Okay. Were you being a tourist, or what was your specific reason for being there?
I went there with the Michigan Peace Team. That's now called the Meta Peace Team.
Okay.
And we went there to work with a group called the International Solidarity Movement.
Yep.
It's a Palestinian-led movement that uses nonviolent resistance to try to end the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
And how did you get hooked up with these people? Was there a group around Lansing area or what?
Well, Michigan Peace Team is a Lansing-based organization
Okay.
founded by Father Peter Doherty.
Okay.
So I was aware of them through their work in southern Mexico and Chiapas in support of the Zapatista movement. And
Okay. The Zapatista movement. And what is the Zapatista movement? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Are you familiar?
oh boy, that'd be.
That's a whole
there
nother
was an
story.
uprising in Chiapas.
Okay, yep.
You know, in the I want to say in the early '90s.
Yep.
The indigenous uprising. I couldn't give you all the details, but
And so this father, he was a Catholic. What was his name again?
he still is Father Peter Doherty.
Peter Doherty.
Yep.
Okay.
He's an amazing man.
Okay.
Has been involved in peace and justice activism
Yep.
full time for
Yep.
decades.
And so, how did you initially find this group?
Honestly,
Yeah.
a flyer came blowing up to me on MSU's campus when I was
Really?
taking a walk, and I picked it up, and they were talking about their work in Chiapas, and I called the number on the flyer. This was
Really?
Before the internet,
Good old-fashioned marketing, man.
Yeah.
Put flyers up. And so, when you went to the West Bank and you went to Gaza, the 3 different years in Israel, for when you went there, what was your day like? So you got in, did you fly into like Tel Aviv and then drive into the West Bank and stuff like that? Tell me about the security and how that all worked.
Getting in,
Yeah.
we had to have stories. If we came in and said we're here to work with the International Solidarity Movement, there was every reason to believe we would be turned back.
Right.
Many people were, so we always came in saying we're here to just be tourists.
Right.
We're here to do religious pilgrimage kind of stuff.
Right.
But and sometimes we came in through Tel Aviv, sometimes through Jordan,
Yep.
depending on what we thought the best chances were. But I always made it through without issue. So
Okay. And so when you got inside of, like say you're in the West Bank and Rafah, what was your day like then? What were you trying to plan with the movement in Palestine?
I would say some of the most important work I was doing was their nonviolence trainings, because
Yep.
we had activists coming from all over the world, and I had a strong background in nonviolent civil disobedience from working with Earth First in Northern California
Yep.
and some other movements around the country, and so they wanted me to be their trainer. They insisted I was their trainer because they had nobody else, and
Okay.
so I found myself leading nonviolence workshops for groups of 40 to 50 internationals from all over the world. Sometimes having to have my workshops translated into different languages.
Yep.
And really I had to tell them that the International Solidarity Movement is a loose-knit organization, and all of our leaders may be in prison at any time, so you may get no support. This training is probably all you're going to get.
Yep.
And, we're going to give you the best we got, and we're going to send you out into a conflict zone, and good luck. And that was intimidating, but in order for me to be willing to do it, I had to be honest with people.
Right.
This is what we are. We're just a movement. We're not some vast organization that can provide you much support. So,
Right.
So I did a number of those trainings, and I think that was some of the most important work I did there.
Okay. And so a bunch of people came in, and were you at a conference center or somebody's house or something like
We would
that?
usually be in hotels is where we'd usually do our trainings.
Okay.
We
Interesting.
we did some of them. We did in Bethlehem. We did trainings in Ramallah.
Yep.
Did some trainings for trainers in the Gaza Strip. So yeah.
And so the nonviolent movement and the it's hard to argue with nonviolent protesters, right? It's we had met with a few weeks ago, did an interview with some people who were protesting the Nazi Nazi rally that was on Michigan State University's campus, probably what was that, May time frame, right? And they were mentioning how everybody was getting into a tussle and stuff like that with the Nazis. And, there were fights with the Nazis and everybody was getting into fights and stuff like that. And I was like, well, in a way, you probably want to, you probably don't want to beat up all the Nazis because it just kind of reinforces, a more violent atmosphere. And so nonviolence, right, it has a long history, obviously, like with Gandhi and, Martin Luther King. And how do you think that the nonviolent movement in that area of the world is taking hold, or in Palestine or the West Bank, or because obviously there's a fair amount of violence on both sides, but do you think that there's a good hope for that being a stronger and stronger movement in those areas, or what's your thoughts there?
I think it's the biggest untold story of
Yep.
Palestine and Israel is there the majority of the resistance. I would say 95% of the resistance that comes from Palestinians and Israeli peace activists alike is nonviolent. There are nonviolent marches every day, nonviolent civil disobedience happening every day, and the response is usually violent. So, you know, what you see, if it gets any attention at all, is you see the tear gas, you see people running for cover, you hear the rubber bullets flying, but 95% of the resistance is nonviolent. It's families, you know, it's elders. It's almost like for Palestinians, just living their day-to-day lives is nonviolent resistance.
Right.
Just survival.
So you think so? It seems like whenever you see things on TV, I mean, you see it in popular media. It's always people throwing rocks, and then other people shooting guns with rubber bullets, and that's what you see. But you would say 95% of the time it's just a regular protest. People are expressing their opinions and their frustrations, and they're not. And so the Israeli forces are predominantly precipitating violence, or is it just a small portion of the overall group that's starting to initiate the violence when there is, or what's kind of the situation there? Is there like a violent protest and then a non-violent protest, or protests start out non-violent and they spiral into violence?
There's all of the above. There's the stone throwing is an interesting thing to focus on for a minute. A lot of the stone throwing started during the first Intifada, and before that time, Israelis occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and they treated it. They governed it. They were able to send tax collectors around collecting taxes. They were able to have they governed it as if they were a legitimate government. During the first Intifada, the Palestinians made a conscious decision to use stone throwing as a technique. And what that meant was we're going to throw stones every time we see Israeli officials, and we're not going to let you govern us. And it was largely successfl because they knew they don't have modern weaponry. Israel's one of the most modern militaries in the world. They have everything the United States has and more.
Well, they're heavily subsidized by the U.S.
They are heavily subsidized. That's exactly right, which is a major reason I felt the moral need to go there and try to be a voice of reason and peace for the Palestinians. But through throwing stones, they made themselves ungovernable. Israel can now occupy, and they do occupy. They can militarily occupy the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but they can no longer govern. If Israelis want to go into Palestinian territories, they need to go in armored personnel carriers. They get out, set up perimeters, and that is the only way they can go in. They can't govern any longer, and they shouldn't be able to govern because it's not. According to the United Nations and everybody else, it's not their territory. It's Palestinian territory. They need to be allowed to govern themselves.
And so essentially, it doesn't seem, you hear about larger, wider scale infractions by the Israeli military at times of unrest in those territories, and they'll send in, a mass of troops and, perhaps, kick in doors and try to get certain people that they deem to be terrorists and haul them out of there, or just, but essentially, they're presently militarily occupying, or at least occupying the border and controlling the flow of people in and out. But is there active military posts inside of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank at this time, or is it essentially they've cordoned off? I see they've been building walls around these areas as well in recent years.
Well, most importantly, in all over the West Bank, there's settlements, and some in the Gaza Strip as well. But
so these are
they're Israelis go in and they just start claiming land, and that's the real story. That's in fact that's a story that never changes. It's hard to you might think it's hard to keep up on the day-to-day news from the Palestine and Israel, and it all seems very complicated. But the story isn't that complicated. The story is Israel takes a little more land, a little more land, a little more land on a daily basis. Probably today, somewhere, a farmer moved his fence out 20 feet and took a little more land from a Palestinian. And that's, a couple of settlers ran up a hill and set up a post and took a little more land from Palestinians. And that's the story. Every day, more land being taken, squeezing the Palestinians out, and they're gonna strike back. There's no doubt about it. There's always going to be there, and really and I don't want to say all Israelis because there is a strong Israeli peace movement who wants to end the occupation.
Right.
But as long as those people in power in Israel believe in a greater Israel, and they believe in an Israel that's much larger than their current legal borders. As long as those people are in power, they actually get what they want when there's violent conflict. Peace for Israel means giving up control of land. It's the only thing peace means. The only way they get peace is to give up control of land. Most people in power in Israeli politics, they want control of more land. Right. They want to expand Israel. So there's no reason to believe that they are going to get behind a peace movement in any legitimate and meaningful way.
That's the old story. War is a battle of real estate. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Whether it's Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union or Israel and Palestine. And so it seems like, most people kind of look at that type of conflict, and see it as kind of as a never-ending, continuous problem that seems to incite additional potential risk of terrorism and that emanates into other territories, right? And so, but to a large extent, the U.S. is fueling that conflict with, potentially money, injecting money, both with the Palestinians, obviously a much less amount, but also with the Israelis. And so, I when I kind of look at the thing and I kind of say to myself, well, if you want to make the problem less, cut back everybody's,
stop sending military aid to Israel.
Right,
absolutely.
Right. Or at least you can control them a little bit more. Hey, we're going to cut back the budgets. Maybe you guys should start figuring stuff out. If you don't, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much money with you, right? Why are we giving you all this money when it's just causing more problems for you, them, and us?
I wish I had the numbers in front of me.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was going to be our focus tonight, but
yeah.
We give so many millions of dollars to Israel. We can't afford to repair our roads. We can't afford to have our schools and our cities be decent, but we can give millions and billions of dollars to Israel every year, and that makes no sense.
What other activism have you been involved in as of recent?
The most exciting thing I'm involved with right now is the Progressive Caucus of the Michigan Democratic Party.
Yep.
We've got some amazing candidates running for office. We've endorsed Dr. Abdul El-Sayed for governor.
So that's a separate kind of subgroup of that's in the Democratic Party, the more progressive, perhaps more, quote unquote. I really don't like labels, but the liberal, more progressive is the word, right?
Yeah.
And so. What fraction or proportion of the Democratic Party do you think is, kind of the progressive portion? Is it, any size of scale at this point? I mean, you kind of think like on the Republican side, there's a little subsection of Tea Party people, right? Mm-hmm. And so, although it's kind of a continually moving thing, there's definitely people who are like, I'm a Tea Party Republican. And so what percentage would you say is in Michigan as a progressive Democrat?
No, my feeling is that the base of the Michigan Democratic Party, the Democrats even nationally, are very progressive. The people all want universal health care. They all want health care as a human right. Yep. But as you get further and further up in the leadership, you have people who have become beholden to corporations.
Right.
And so there's a natural, and it's not necessarily even their fault. It's simply how our system works right now. And that's what is so amazing about the progressive movement within the party is we're trying to get corporate money. We're demanding corporate money get out of our politics. We're like the Progressive Caucus is only endorsing candidates who are not accepting corporate PAC money. So that's that our feeling is if we want corporate money out of politics, we have to walk the walk, and our candidates have to walk the walk.
Right.
So and that's one of the largest problems right now is that our government is basically bought and sold. Our senators spend all their time on the phone. Our congresspeople spend all their time on the phone calling people with money, asking for money, and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And when someone writes you $1 million check, guess what? When they call you, when they want to take you out to lunch, when they need something done, you're going to answer. You have to.
Right.
We've legalized bribery.
Right.
That's how our system works.
Yep. And so, Since it's obviously not gone very far in the courts, where the Supreme Court a number of years ago had a case where they were essentially said, giving money, well, it's freedom of speech, so you can only limit campaign donations so much. You can only limit, political action committees. You can only, if people can say, they can spend money on issue ads, but they have to kind of register differently if they're spending money on, promoting a particular politician. But it seems pretty transparent what they're attempting to do, get certain people elected for their own benefit, right? And so the question is if the strength can be built enough for people to make logical sense. Hey, a progressive person, a progressive political person that's endorsed by the progressive wing, they're certified, they're known not to be taking money from corporate interests, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, that's basically, your litmus test. Would you consider that your main litmus test?
No, I mean we look at issues across the board. We've got a pretty extensive questionnaire we put out to candidates.
Yep.
We've got our caucus has 2 representatives from every district in the state of Michigan, so we're pretty large, and we all meet and we go over the questionnaires and we consider a lot of different issues.
But certainly,
healthcare is a big issue.
But certainly the rule would be number one: you can't take corporate money. That's the bottom line.
That's a big bottom line. Single payer healthcare. People feel very strongly about single payer healthcare.
But if somebody said, "Hey, I believe in all of those things that progressives believe in, but I need to take some corporate money," would you say, "Sorry, you're not a progressive"?
So speaking for myself,
Yep.
I have a more nuanced view of things. I'll look at everything. I'll say, I'll look at the details on any given thing.
Yep.
You have a corporation, right?
Right.
So
Yep.
I don't know. So it's, I think it's important. I think it's important to know where the money's coming from and to have ethical answers from people. And I greatly appreciate our politicians who are willing to say we're not going to take any corporate money.
Yep.
Personally, for me, it's not a litmus test. For the voting bloc, because I'm one of many in the Progressive Caucus, it may come down to probably for the majority, it is. I think the majority are going to say no corporate money, period.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
and I was wondering if that kind of is bubbling up to the top as kind of one of the,
it's always an issue, and the nuances of it are always complicated. Like,
Yeah.
Abdul El Sayed just got an endorsement from the Michigan People's Campaign.
Yeah.
Now, I know some of the people, I've worked with some of the people in the Michigan People's Campaign. They're grassroots activists.
And Abdul
they're
El
people
Sayed.
working in Detroit. They're people working in Flint, trying to get, they're trying to, solve people's water issues. They're grassroots activists. They happen to have filed as a super PAC.
Yep.
So now the issue's coming up like, oh, Abdul got endorsed by a super PAC. What's that mean?
Right.
It's the spirit of it. The spirit of people being against super PACs and corporate money in politics. I don't think Michigan People's Campaign is afoul of the spirit of that.
Right.
It's simply to be a super PAC. It's just a box you check when you file your PAC. And
Right.
that's the box they chose to check.
Yeah.
So it's nuanced, but at the end of the day, people just want our politicians not to be corrupt.
Yep. The progressive movement, would you say it's getting stronger in Michigan? You think it's a rising kind of thing? Like, for example, Bernie Sanders perhaps would be considered a progressive portion of the national party that took on kind of Hillary.
So I'll tell you a little story. I don't know if
Yep.
you're aware of what happened at the last Michigan Democratic Party convention.
No.
April 15th,
Yep.
there was an ice storm.
Oh, okay.
Half-inch of ice.
Yep.
Like, I woke up in the morning and I always said, oh my God, because I had a bus full of people registered to go to the Michigan Democratic Party convention in Detroit.
Yep.
And I thought, is anybody going to show up? And I went out and I scraped ice off my truck, and it was thick, and I was scary driving down the roads. They all were covered in a sheet of ice. I went to pick up a friend, got him. By the time I got there, it was late. I thought, is anybody going to be here? I thought the bus was going to be empty. I got there, and the bus was already full.
Right.
I couldn't believe it. Everybody had showed up. And you know why they showed up? They wanted to go to the convention, and they wanted to support Dana Nessel for Attorney General. Dana Nessel is the woman who got spearheaded the DeBoer case, that helped to get same-sex marriage legalized nationwide.
Yep.
And she was running to be the Democratic candidate for Attorney General against a more centrist candidate, I would say, named Pat Miles, who was backed by the UAW, backed by pretty much the Democratic establishment.
Yep.
And the Progressive Caucus backed Dana Nessel. And at the end of the day, we won an overwhelming victory.
Really?
First time UAW endorsed candidate in modern history did not get the endorsement.
Yep.
And that was a sign that the progressives have arrived in the Democratic Party here in Michigan.
Yep.
The Attorney General position is the second most powerful, if not the most powerful position in the state government. So for us to be the deciding factor in who that nominee was amazing, and it was a great victory. It was an overwhelming victory. But when Pat Miles conceded, Dana Nessel had over 60% of the vote, and the places remaining to be counted were all known to be in her favor. So it was an amazing victory, and now she is the Democratic candidate for Attorney General. And and there's a lot of people that were traditionally maybe left of the Democratic Party who joined the Michigan Democratic Party to support Dana Nessel.
Yep.
And now they're here to stay.
Yep.
Now they're here to stay. They said, oh my gosh, we have our candidate, and now we're backing Abdul El-Sayed. We're extremely excited about Abdul.
Yep.
We also have as
Well, so what do you think about this? There's the other fellow running, Sri Tanadar, right? Is it Tanadar? Yeah, he's a...
Tanadar got...
Tanadar, yeah.
So I'll tell you a little story. He came into, at that convention I was just talking about, April 15th.
Yep.
We, Progressive Caucus, we had one of the biggest rooms in the building because we were huge. We had hundreds of members there.
Yep.
And we had our endorsed candidates speaking.
Yep.
Sri Tanadar came in and he said, "Can I speak?" And he was told no because we weren't even going to have a chance to have all our endorsed candidates speak. We were going to run out of time.
Yep.
And we said, "We're sorry. You can't speak. We don't have time right now. We have our endorsed candidates who are lined up all along this wall and waiting to speak." And he went up to our chair, who was at the podium, and tried to push her out of the way and speak anyway. And she said, "No, Shri."
Yeah.
Like he messed with Kelly Collison, who's running for Congress in the state rep in the 68th. So like great, amazing activist woman. And he ran up against her, and she said, "No, Shri, like you can't speak. You're not on our agenda." And he tried to step in front of her and speak anyway, and he got booed out of the room.
Oh, really? Huh.
The Progressive Caucus, hundreds of people booed Sri Tanadar out of the room. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we got a lot of flack for that from people in the Michigan Democratic Party because they hadn't figured out yet that Shri's a fraud.
Right.
But he is a fraud.
Yep.
And now they figured it out at this point, and now everybody's like, "Oh yeah, Shri's a fraud."
Yep.
You know? And we're like, "Yeah, we always knew it. Why do you think we booed him out of our caucus?"
Right.
But yeah, he's a fraud. He's claiming to be the progressive candidate.
Yep.
He's never done anything progressive in his life.
Yep.
Maybe he's a nice guy. Maybe he's a decent businessman. I don't know. But he's got no record that shows that he's simply adopted progressive platform,
right,
and says, "I'm the most progressive candidate in the race."
Right.
But we're not buying it.
Right.
We have real progressives running. We have a couple of them. Honestly. So Abdul El-Sayed, he's been embraced by the national movement.
Yep.
He's got Alexandria Cortez. Forgetting her hyphenated last name, I'm sorry, but she's endorsed him.
Yep.
She's speaking for him. She's making the tours of Michigan now on his behalf. He's been endorsed by Bill McKibben with the 350 movement on global warming. Our Revolution has endorsed him, the movement that was behind Bernie Sanders movement. So,
what do you think about his overall, viability as a candidate coming up? We're very close to the primary right now, right? Mm-hmm. How's things looking so far for him?
In the polls, he's a little bit behind Gretchen Whitmer, who's frankly also a very good candidate. So it's no surprise that she would be hard to beat.
Right.
But
we got Shri.
But he's climbing. He's climbing. He came from nowhere.
Yep.
And his polling is going up like astronomically. Like I think the last poll, like he had gone from like 3% all the way up to 18, which is it's like unheard of. He's climbing, and he's been getting major endorsements, and I can tell you the enthusiasm behind his campaign is just incredible. While Whitmer has more of the establishment behind him, El Sayed's got progressive activists who are knocking doors for him, holding house parties for him, and they're excited about him.
So a question, you see this you kind of see it with the 1% movement, you see it with, the Tea Party movement. It seems to me that we're starting to have a little bit more, like obviously Trump is not your classical, GOP candidate either, right? And so to some extent, do you think in this age that political parties are becoming less structured, less important perhaps than the person or the ideas, or where do you see the general separation and the future of political movements in general?
That's a big question, but I think social media definitely plays a role. It's easy for regular people to be engaged in conversations about what's going on.
Do you think that's strengthening the progressive portion of the Democratic Party? Do you think it's getting a lot stronger over the last few years, or what?
I think so, absolutely. It's the communication that's able to take place, and how we can be connected to a congressional race running in New York, and we can know what's going on because our progressive friends in New York are telling us about it. And,
right.
They can be connected to what's going on in Michigan because, we have Abdul here, and it's those connections are strong, and it's a lot of us are getting our news now from each other, and that can be bad, but it can also be good, it can allow us to have a strong voice and allow, and young people that are growing up now and becoming voters, and the millennials, they've got the social media stuff down, and that's a lot of the millennials are a large part of the Bernie Sanders movement, the movement that's now behind Abdul El-Sayed, behind Olivia Octavio Cortez, it's the millennial powers, the young people, they're the future.
Right. And so, that's the way I kind of see things going. You think at national politics, right? Perhaps at the presidential level, it'll have to be more of a rebellious type of candidate, or more of a progressive candidate, or somebody who's not. Hillary Clinton, they seemed to think was really, seemed like a very establishment type candidate, right? A very polished, kind of candidate. And I think it seems to me that on both sides of the political spectrum that, turmoil is going to become more of the standard, right? That you're not necessarily going to be able to count on party structure. Your funding can come from millions of people donating $10 or $20, rather than necessarily getting all your funding from the Republican Party or from the Democratic Party, right? Your ability to independently fundraise is directly to constituents is enhanced with internet technology. How is the progressive portion of the party funded? Do you guys do fundraisers, or how, not that you want to take corporate money.
Okay. Yep. So the truth is we're not.
Right. Okay. Great.
Sure, we do fundraisers. We all donate parts of our paycheck.
Right.
But our strength isn't our money.
Right.
That is what gives us our strength is that we're knocking doors.
Right.
We're making phone calls. We've got our we've got our social media presence. We're volunteering. It's a real grassroots effort, and the money is hard to come by. That's the honest truth. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have you knock on doors for 5 hours any day than give me $100.
Right.
Because it's way more valuable. So the fact that we have an army of people all over the state knocking doors, making phone calls, that's our power, not our finances.
Yep. And so is there, you had mentioned there was like a chairperson or of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And so you're helping out at the grassroots level, getting people to the convention and stuff like that. You mentioned at the beginning of this you were chipping ice away from your truck in order to be able to get on a bus to drive down to Detroit, and you were surprised to see everybody showing up, right? And so what's your kind of role, and what do you see kind of your future as? Just kind of a foot soldier to help out, or what are your thoughts going forward?
My future, I'm not really too focused on that. I've been an activist for decades. I'm always going to be fighting for peace and social justice. I'm going to be fighting for people to have decent jobs and whatever the issue is that comes across my plate where I think I can help people. I'm going to try to help people. I feel like I'm privileged. I grew up in the East Lansing area. I swing a hammer for a living, but I make enough that my bills are paid. Right. I'm comfortable. My kids are taken care of. We have good lives. So I want everybody to have that. Yep. So I'm not too worried about my future. What do I see as the future of politics or the power structures that be? I'm certainly hoping there's a wave of. I think we got to swing back left. We got to swing back. I mean, it's right now. What's happening is scary. With we got neighbors getting rounded up, right? We got the ICE is running around our country like a Gestapo. I gave a ride from Calhoun County Jail to Toledo to 4 women who'd been in jail for over a month. They got rounded up at their place of work. Now, how is that helping us, right? Yep. And they got released on thousands of dollars bond. And these women had families. The woman who was riding shotgun, I got to know best. She's been here over 20 years. She has kids. I remember this because her kids were almost the same age as mine. She had kids 4, 12, and 17, I think it was.
Was she originally from?
Her kids. She's from Guatemala.
Oh, Guatemala.
Her kids are. Her kids are all American citizens.
Yep.
Her husband's an American citizen. And yet she's going to be deported.
Yeah.
And I hope not. But there's no reason to think they're not going to deport her. They're deporting everybody.
Right.
They've released her for a moment because activist groups like Orlich out of Ohio has raised the money, paid her bond, paid for her lawyers, got her out of jail, got a volunteer to transport her back to Ohio. But how is that making us safer? This is so I gotta think this isn't what the American people want. I know it's what some people want.
Right.
But I don't think that's the majority. I think people have really been misled. They've been made afraid of immigrants. They've been told immigrants, they got to be afraid of the other. But that's not truly who people want to be. I think we just have to give them the opportunity to have something better. We got to show them that there is a better way, there is a better future, and I think we'll get there.
Well, hey, I really appreciate it, and thanks for your time.
Oh, thanks for having me here.
It's great being here. Well, for those of you watching, we're signing off. Good night, and have a good evening, or day, or whatever, morning, whenever you're watching. This has been Interview with an Interesting Person, Mike McCurdy.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you.